Under the harvest moon, whispers never fade. They simply wait to be heard again. Welcome, dear dreamer. This is Evelyn Blackwood, and you're listening to Midnight Murmurs Radio, where every whisper carries a secret, and every secret finds a voice beneath the night sky. Tonight's tale drifts through the golden hush of autumn, under the watchful glow of the harvest moon, a night when the air hums softly with echoes of gratitude, memory, and something just beyond understanding. This, my dear listener, is your bedtime story, your relaxing sleep story, your gentle guided sleep meditation wrapped in the coziest folds of moonlight and mystery. So, let's begin. Lie back now. Let your body sink deeper into the warmth of your sheets. Take a slow, deep breath in and exhale gently, letting the day dissolve into stillness. Feel the weight of your thoughts drift away like leaves carried by an evening wind. Your shoulders loosen, your hands grow still. The rhythm of your breathing steadies, slow and calm. Tonight, you don't need to do anything except listen and let your mind wander softly, safely into the story. With each breath, imagine yourself stepping away from the noise of your world, walking into an open field where the scent of harvest lingers and fireflies blink like tiny lanterns in the dusk. You are safe here. You're home beneath the sky, and as you listen, the harvest moon rises, enormous, golden, and silent, watching over you like an old friend. Clara Whitmore hadn't set foot in her grandmother's farm for nearly 15 years. The old place sat on the edge of Maple Hollow, a small town tucked between fading hills and whispering cornfields. When she arrived that evening, the air carried the crisp scent of dry hay and cider. Every porch still had pumpkins lined up, and paper lanterns swayed in the wind, preparations for the town's harvest festival this weekend. The farm looked just as she remembered. The barn sagging a little, the white fence tilting, and the fields stretching far beyond sight. But under the pale gold of the rising moon, something felt different, as though the land itself was listening. As Clara pushed open the creaky gate, the wind sighed through the cornstalks, low and mournful, almost like a voice. She paused, staring into the field. The last light of dusk flickered across the horizon, and for a brief second, she could have sworn she saw a flicker of movement, a soft glow deep among the rows of corn, like a lantern being carried by invisible hands. Her grandmother used to tell stories about the corn lantern vigil, a folk ritual held every harvest moon. When the crops are cut and the moon turns gold, she'd whisper, the spirits of those who once tended the earth come home. They wander the fields, following the light of the corn lanterns, making sure the land remembers their touch. Clara smiled faintly, brushing off the chill that crept along her spine. She told herself it was just the wind, whoosed, memory. But as she walked toward the old farmhouse, every step seemed to stir echoes in the soil beneath her, faint murmurs like the land whispering her name. Inside, the house was still and dust-laden. Moonlight pooled through the broken curtains, painting the wooden floor in amber stripes. The air smelled of cedar and old apples. On the kitchen table lay an old oil lamp, its glass fogged with age. Clara hesitated, then struck a match. The flame flickered to life, and for a heartbeat, She thought she saw a figure in the window. Just her reflection, she told herself. Only that. Outside, the fields shimmered under the moon's silver breath, and from somewhere beyond the barn, faint and slow, came the echo of a song, a woman's voice, low and ancient, humming an old harvest lullaby, the same one her grandmother used to sing. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Asterisk. The song drifted through the night like mist, soft, wavering, carried by the wind as though it came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Clara stood still, her heart beating slow but heavy as the melody wound its way across the fields. It was the lullaby her grandmother used to hum while baking apple pies, a tune that spoke of golden fields, safe returns, and the promise of dawn. Yet here, beneath the harvest moon, the song felt older, like something the earth itself remembered. She stepped out onto the porch, the floorboards creaking softly beneath her feet. The air shimmered faintly, and the sound of crickets dimmed, as if nature was holding its breath to listen. Down near the edge of the cornfield, a faint light glowed, not the white beam of a lantern, but something warmer, golden, trembling like a candle flame. Clara hesitated. Her rational mind whispered for her to stay inside, to shut the door and wait until morning. But curiosity, gentle and insistent, urged her forward. She took the old oil lamp from the table and stepped into the yard, her shadow stretching long and thin across the ground. The grass rustled softly. The scent of dry leaves and soil filled her senses. Each breath seemed to echo in the quiet, every heartbeat a small drum against the night. As she reached the field, the cornstalks swayed, though the air was still. The glow deep within flickered again. Tin Bunny said, leaving only darkness and the steady hum of the night. She stepped between the rows, her hand brushing against the dry leaves. The air felt heavier here, not dangerous, but watchful. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once, twice, then fell silent. The earth beneath her shoes was cool and damp. Then she found it. A small lantern hanging from a wooden stake. Its wick still warm though the flame had gone out. The glass was clouded, but carved on the handle was something she hadn't seen since childhood. Her grandmother's initials, intertwined with a harvest symbol, a crescent moon over crossed stalks of corn. Clara Frossi. Her grandmother's lantern had been buried with her, the same one she used every autumn for the corn lantern vigil. Her breath trembled as she whispered into the dark. "Who's there?" The wind stirred, low and slow, carrying the scent of wood smoke and apples. For a moment, she thought she heard footsteps in the soil behind her. Not hurried, just soft, as if someone was walking carefully to avoid startling her. She turned, but there was only the field, golden and silent beneath the moon. Then came the whisper. Not loud, but close enough that she felt it brush her ear. "You came back." Clara's heart seized. She lifted the lamp higher, its dim glow casting trembling shadows on the corn leaves. "Who said that?" she asked, her voice barely more than breath. The air shimmered faintly, and between the rows, she saw something the shape of a woman, faint as moonlight, standing just beyond reach. Her outline glowed with a pale warmth, her hands folded gently before her. and though Clara couldn't see her face, she felt a strange pull in her chest, an aching familiarity. "Grandma, Grandma," she whispered. The figure didn't move. Instead, a soft sound rose again, that same lullaby, hummed through lips that didn't quite exist, filling the air with both comfort and sorrow. The cornstalks swayed in rhythm with the tune, and a breeze carried with it the faint sound of a bell, distant, echoing. Clara's eyes blurred with tears. She reached forward, fingers trembling, but as soon as she stepped closer, the figure faded, dissolving into the golden mist until there was nothing left but silence and the gentle rustle of the harvest field. She stood there for a long while, unable to move. The lantern in her hand flickered weakly, and for an instant she thought she saw movement again. Dozens of faint lights across the fields, like tiny lanterns rising from the ground, drifting slowly into the air. They shimmered like souls, like memories set free. The corn lantern vigil, her grandmother's story, the one everyone thought was just folklore, but it was real, alive, breathing around her. And as the harvest moon climbed higher, Clara heard the voices of the past, laughter, songs, the sound of children running through the fields until they faded into the wind. She whispered into the night, "I remember," and the earth seemed to sigh in return, a deep, peaceful exhale, as if it too had been waiting for her to come home. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Dawn arrived quietly, draping the hills in a veil of pale gold. The mist rose from the fields, curling through the cornstalks like breath, exhaled by the earth itself. Clara awoke to the sound of birdsong, faint and distant, mingled with the soft creak of the farmhouse settling under the morning sun. For a moment she lay still, unsure whether the night before had been a dream. The song, the lantern, the whisper, it all seemed too fragile, too strange, to belong to daylight. Yet when she sat up, the smell of burnt oil lingered faintly in the room, and the old lantern she'd carried still sat on the nightstand, its glass smudged with soot, its handle carved with her grandmother's initials. She traced the mark gently with her fingertip, feeling a small, cold pulse of recognition. Beneath it, she noticed something else, a faint streak of dirt on the floorboards leading from the window to the door, as if someone had been standing there while she slept. She rose slowly, the wooden floor cool under her bare feet, and crossed to the window. Outside, the fields stretched in soft gold, rippling gently in the morning breeze. Nothing moved. No figures in the corn, no lights, no trace of last night's whispers. But near the old barn, something caught her eye, a small patch of blackened earth, the soil still damp, as though a fire had been lit there recently. Her pulse quickened. She threw on her coat, grabbed the lantern, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, tinged with the sweetness of apples and the faint smoke of distant chimneys. Dew glittered on the grass. Each step toward the barn felt heavier, slower, as if the land itself was testing her resolve. When she reached the scorched patch, she crouched down. The soil was warm. In the ashes, half buried, she found a piece of cloth, faded, frayed, but unmistakably familiar. It was a strip from her grandmother's harvest shawl, embroidered with the same moon and corn symbol. The edges were singed, but the thread still gleamed faintly in the light. Clara held it close, her breath trembling. She remembered her grandmother's hands, wrinkled and strong, tying that shawl around her shoulders during her first festival as a child. "Every harvest has a keeper," her grandmother used to say. "Someone who remembers. Someone who listens." Clara's throat tightened. The words returned now with a strange weight, as if they'd been meant for this moment, this place. She turned toward the barn. The doors hung crooked on rusted hinges, one slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of hay and iron. Shafts of light spilled through the cracks, painting the air with golden lines. She stepped inside, the boards creaking softly beneath her boots. At first, it was quiet. Only the distant hum of morning. But then, beneath the stillness, came a faint rhythm. Tap, bounce, tap, tap. It sounded like someone knocking gently from the inside of the barn walls. She froze, every sense sharpening. The sound came again, steady, deliberate, from the far corner near the old grain barrels. Heart pounding, she lifted the lantern. The light flickered over the beams, the dusty tools, the coiled ropes. Then it caught something faint carvings etched into the wood. Dozens of small crescent moons, crossed with stalks of corn, scratched by hand into the wall. Below them, faint letters. For those who came before. Her breath hitched. The symbols weren't new. Some had been there for decades, layered over one another like a ritual repeated year after year. Her grandmother's handwriting was among them. Clara traced one of the carvings, and as her fingers brushed the grooves, the air around her cooled sharply. The lantern flame wavered. A whisper brushed her ear again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Light the way." The words were clear, real. Her heart raced, but her fear was mingled with something else. A pull, a sense of purpose. She turned slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. Against the back wall stood a row of old wooden lanterns, dusty but intact, lined like sentinels waiting to be awakened. And beside them, a small box carved from oak, its lid inlaid with the harvest symbol. Clara reached for it, hands trembling. Inside, wrapped in burlap, were candle stubs, each marked with initials. Some she recognized from her family tree, others older, unknown. Generations of Whitmores, the keepers of the harvest. As she stared at them, the barn seemed to sigh a low, resonant sound, like the earth itself exhaling. The sunlight outside dimmed, though the morning had only just begun. The flame of her lantern flared briefly, then settled into a steady glow, golden and alive. She whispered into the quiet, "What do you want me to do?" The air responded with a rustle, the faint echo of her grandmother's lullaby, carried through the beams like a secret remembered. And in that moment, Clara understood the vigil wasn't over. It had been waiting for her. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The afternoon passed beneath a sky brushed with pale amber, the kind of quiet light that made the hills look soft and endless. Clara spent the day cleaning the farmhouse, each movement slow, methodical, but her mind stayed anchored to the box of candles and the carvings in the barn. Every time she paused, she thought she heard faint tapping again, as if something beneath the floorboards wanted to remind her that it was still there. By evening, The clouds drifted apart, revealing the harvest moon climbing once more, immense and glowing, a perfect circle of gold that seemed almost close enough to touch. The crickets began their song, steady and rhythmic, and the scent of the fields deepened into that strange, nostalgic sweetness that only autumn carries. Clara stood on the porch, holding one of the old candles. The initials carved into the waxy W were her own. For a moment, she wondered if someone had known she would come back, or if the candle had simply been waiting. She struck a match, the flame flaring small and trembling in the cool air. As it caught, the wax glowed faintly from within, and something about its warmth steadied her heartbeat. The wind sighed through the corn, low and slow, and a familiar voice echoed in her memory. "Light the way," her grandmother had whispered in last night's dream, or was it not a dream at all? Clara lifted the lantern, its glow casting soft halos across the porch. The fields beyond shimmered as though they, too, held their breath. She made her way toward the barn, guided by the pulse of light in her hand. When she reached the doorway, she hesitated. The shadows inside seemed deeper tonight, thicker somehow, as if they knew what was coming. She stepped through, the lantern swinging gently at her side. The rows of old lanterns she'd found earlier stood silently, their glass eyes catching the light. One by one, she brushed the dust away and placed a candle in each. The scent of melted wax mingled with hay and cedar. When she lit the first one, the flame flickered, then steadied, glowing golden. As she moved from one to the next, the barn began to change. The air grew warmer, richer, vibrating with a subtle hum that felt alive. By the time she lit the last candle, the walls seemed to breathe. Shadows moved softly along the beams, not threatening, but curious, like the souls of the harvest come to watch. Outside, the wind picked up. The door creaked open a little wider, letting the moonlight spill across the floor. And then, faintly, at first, she heard it again. The lullaby. It was not a single voice this time, but many. A chorus of low, gentle humming rising from the fields, woven into the rustle of the corn. The sound wrapped around her, familiar yet vast. A hymn older than the town itself. The candles flickered in unison, their flames bending toward the open door. Clara followed the direction they leaned, stepping out into the yard. The moon hung directly above now, its light pouring like honey over the land. The corn shimmered silver gold, each stalk swaying in perfect rhythm with the song. And there, at the edge of the field, the lanterns began to appear again. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, glowing softly in the dark. They moved with a slow grace, floating above the ground, as if carried by invisible hands. Clara walked toward them, her feet silent on the soil. The song grew clearer, layered with whispers and sighs, words she almost understood, but not quite. She stopped when she reached the fence, her breath catching at the sight before her. The figures were there, faint, translucent, wrapped in light. Men and women in old harvest clothes, their faces gentle, peaceful. They moved between the rows, tending the fields as though time had never touched them. And among them, one turned and looked directly at her, her grandmother. The vision was so soft, she could hardly tell where the moonlight ended and her form began. But this meal, that quiet, knowing smile, was the same. The old woman raised the lantern, its flame steady despite the wind, and nodded once, slow and deliberate. Clara lifted hers in return. The song shifted, deepened, until it felt like it came from the ground, the air, her own heartbeat. The lanterns around them burned brighter. The field glowed. The spirits paused in their silent work, their faces lifting to the moon as if in prayer. Clara closed her eyes, feeling warmth spread through her chest, a peace she hadn't known in years. When she opened them again, the field was empty. Only the corn swayed, whispering softly in the night. The candles in the barn still flickered, and the harvest moon watched silently above, its golden eye reflecting in her tears. She whispered into the breeze, "Thank you for remembering me." From somewhere in the distance came a final echo, her grandmother's voice, faint as the wind. "Now you will remember us." As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Morning broke over Salem Hollow in a veil of pale gold, soft and hazy. After the long night, the fog drifted low across the fields, curling between the corn stalks like breath from the earth itself. Clara awoke on the porch, the lantern still warm in her hand, though its flame had burned out hours ago. Her hair smelled faintly of smoke and wax. For a moment she thought the night's vision might have been a dream, until she noticed the candles. They were still burning in the barn, steady and bright, untouched by time. A shiver went through her as she rose. The air held a strange quiet, not empty, but listening. Even the crows in the trees seemed to wait. She stepped barefoot onto the path, the dew cool against her skin. The farmhouse looked different in the daylight, the boards smoother, the windows less clouded. When she glanced toward the road, she froze. The old milestone that had been chipped and faded for decades now looked newly carved, the letters clean and deep. Salem Hollow, established 1763. Clara ran her fingers across the stone. It felt fresh, the edges sharp, as if chiseled yesterday. Then she heard it, the faint sound of a horse and wagon. Turning, she saw a figure cresting the hill. A man in a brown hat and suspenders, his wagon piled high with pumpkins and wheat. The sight felt wrong somehow, like a painting from another century come to life. He tipped his hat as he passed. "Morning, Miss Whitaker. Fine harvest this year." The name struck her like a bell. Whitaker, her grandmother's maiden name. She blinked and the wagon was gone, the fog swallowing it whole. The road was empty again. Heart pounding, she hurried toward the town square, or where the town should be. The road wound past the familiar stone bridge, yet everything beyond it shimmered buildings that looked newer but older at once, their signs hand-painted, their lanterns still lit in daylight. The smell of fresh bread wafted from a bakery that hadn't existed in 100 years. People walked the cobblestones in old-fashioned clothes, their faces kind but pale, eyes that gleamed like smoke under glass. A woman carrying a basket of apples paused as Clara approached. "You made it through the night," she said softly. Clara hesitated. "What night?" The woman smiled, a tired, knowing smile. "The night of the remembering. The lanterns called, and you answered. The harvest keeps its promises." She placed an apple in Clara's hand. It was warm, too warm. When Clara looked down, the fruit glowed faintly with golden light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Before she could speak, the church bell rang low, echoing through the mist. The townsfolk froze for a moment, heads bowed, then carried on as if nothing happened. But Clara noticed the fog shifting, rolling faster now, like waves closing in. The bakery, the bridge, even the faces began to blur. The apple dimmed in her hand, turning to cold ash that slipped through her fingers. And then she was alone again, standing at the edge of the empty field. The barn still glowed faintly behind her, the candles inside unwavering. A faint whisper curled through the fog, the same voice that had guided her through the night. You remembered. Now you must keep the light. Clara looked back toward the farmhouse. The old weather vane spun slowly on the roof, though no wind stirred. She felt something beneath her feet, a heartbeat in the earth itself, pulsing in rhythm with her own. The veil between past and present had thinned, and she was standing in both. She lifted her lantern once more. The glass had mended itself, and inside a small flame flickered to life on its own. It reflected in her eyes, steady, golden, alive. As she turned toward the road again, the fog parted just enough to show a path leading deeper into the valley. A path that hadn't been there before. Somewhere beyond it, the song began again, soft and distant. Clara took a breath, stepped forward, and followed the sound, her lantern glowing brighter with every step. The road through the valley wound like a silver ribbon beneath the harvest moon is a fading glow. Clara followed its curve, her lantern held close, the mist curling around her ankles like sleepy ghosts, reluctant to let her pass. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became, until even the crickets ceased their song. Only the faint hum, that strange, ancient melody, guided her forward, a thread of sound woven through the air. It came from somewhere beyond the willows, where the fog shimmered like water under moonlight. When she reached it, she saw what looked like an old wooden bridge, its planks slick with dew. At the other side, faint lights glowed, soft amber, flickering, like candles floating in jars. She crossed carefully, each step creaking like a whisper from another century. As she stepped off the final plank, the fog thinned, revealing a village she had never seen, yet somehow knew. The village of Hollow's End lay nestled between two dark ridges, thatched roofs bent low under ivy, chimneys curled smoke into the night, and in every window a candle burned. The air smelled of cider and ash, sweet decay and hearth smoke, the scent of memory itself. Villagers moved slowly through the square, carrying lanterns shaped like gourds and apples, faces calm, dreamlike, half there and half not. They passed her with polite nods, whispering blessings she couldn't quite hear. In the center of the square stood a great harvest tree, its branches hung with ribbons, feathers, and fragments of parchment that fluttered though there was no breeze. Beneath it burned a single fire, its flame white and silent. An old woman sat by the fire, rocking gently in a chair that seemed older than the soil itself. Her eyes were silver, her hair a halo of white strands like smoke. Clara felt drawn to her as if the woman had been waiting centuries for her arrival. "You've come," the elder murmured. "The blood remembers." Clara knelt beside her. "What is this place?" The woman smiled faintly. "The echo between worlds. We gather here when the moon ripens full, to honor the promise of the harvest and those who kept it. Long ago, your kin were among us. Clara's heart beat faster. My family? The old woman nodded. The Whitakers, keepers of the lantern light. It was your grandmother who first crossed the veil, guided by the song of the earth. But when she turned away from the old pact, the fields began to fade. Each year, fewer remembered the truth. Until you, Clara stared into the white fire. Within its glow, shapes flickered, men and women in old clothes, laughing, threshing wheat, dancing around bonfires. Then, without warning, the images darkened. A shadow crept across the fields, and the laughter turned to screams. The fire iced. What happened? She whispered. The elders' eyes gleamed like wet stone. They forgot gratitude. They took what the earth gave, but no longer gave back. The harvest spirit withdrew, and the land fell silent. Only the lanterns kept the memory alive. Clara's lantern flickered in her hand. Its flame grew stronger, steadier. And now? She asked softly. Now you must decide, the woman said. The moon wanes. Soon, either rekindle the covenant, or let Salem Hollow fade forever. Clara felt a wind shift, though no wind blew. Around the edges of the village, the fog began to twist into shapes. Figures in tattered clothes, faces hollow-eyed, drifting nearer. They were not hostile, only lost. Their whispers brushed her skin. Remember us. Remember the light? The elder rose slowly and pressed a small object into Clara's palm. A seed, black as midnight. Plant this at dawn, where the fog meets the corn. Speak your name to the soil. If your heart is true, the harvest will return. The fire dimmed, and the villagers began to fade, each turning into mist that shimmered briefly before dissolving into the air. Only the old woman remained, her form flickering like a candle flame in the wind. Go now, child. The night thins. Keep the light, or all will sleep forever. The voice echoed long after she vanished. Clara stood alone again beneath the vast, silent tree. The fog rolled back in, the world turning soft and weightless. She looked down at the seed, feeling its warmth pulse like a heartbeat in her hand. Then she turned toward the east, where the first faint line of dawn brushed the hills. Her lantern glowed brighter, answering the coming sun. And as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Dawn came quietly to Salem Hollow, slipping over the hills like a whispered secret. The fog was thinning now, curling away from the fields in soft ribbons of gold and gray. Clara walked barefoot through the dew-drenched grass, clutching the black seed the elder had given her. The earth was cool beneath her feet, the kind of cold that felt alive, breathing. The lantern in her hand still glowed with its steady golden heart, though the air smelled faintly of rain and ashes. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Somewhere behind her, a rooster crowed. But the sound came doubled, as though another echo answered from a different century. She reached the edge of the cornfield where the mist met the soil. Just as the old woman had said, the stalks stood motionless, their leaves heavy with morning dew. Clara knelt and brushed aside the dirt. Beneath the surface, the ground pulsed faintly, like something sleeping beneath. She whispered her name to the soil. Clara Whitmore, she said softly, her voice trembling. I remember. The seed in her palm grew warm, almost too hot to hold. When she pressed it into the earth, the light from her lantern flared a single breath of brightness that spread outward like ripples in water. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, deep beneath her fingers, the soil shifted. A faint hum rose from the ground. The same melody she had heard through the night. The corn stirred, though there was no wind. One by one, droplets of dew lifted from the leaves and floated into the air, tiny spheres of silver light. They drifted around her, circling her in slow spirals before dissolving into the morning haze. Clara stood, heart pounding. The fields had changed. The color of the corn was richer now, almost bronze, as if kissed by eternal sunset. The scarecrow at the far end of the rows turned its head ever so slightly toward her, its straw-stuffed hand lifted almost in salute. She blinked, and it was still again. Yet the air carried a faint scent of candle wax and cider. She heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw a group of figures emerging from the fog. Farmers, women, children, their clothes faded but their eyes bright. They smiled as they passed, carrying baskets of wheat and fruit that shimmered faintly with inner light. One of them, a young boy with freckles, tipped his hat. "You did it," he whispered. "You remembered the song." Clara wanted to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She could feel tears burning behind her eyes. The boy pointed toward the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight touched the trees. "When the harvest moon rises again," he said, "light the lantern, and we'll return to dance." His voice faded like a dream, and so did and soon all the others melted back into the mist. The silence that followed was warm, not empty. Clara looked at the ground where she had planted the seed. A single sprout had already broken through, small, fragile, but glowing faintly gold. She knelt beside it and touched one leaf, feeling the hum of life beneath her skin. Behind her, the farmhouse creaked. She turned to see the door swing open on its own, revealing the kitchen table where her grandmother's old recipe book lay. She stepped inside. The house no longer looked abandoned. Sunlight filtered through clean windows. The air smelled of cinnamon and freshly baked bread. On the counter sat a small note, written in her grandmother's hand. "Keep the light. Never let the fields go dark again." Clara traced the words with her fingers. The ink shimmered, alive for a moment, before fading into the paper. She smiled faintly and set her lantern beside the note. The flame inside steadied, soft and calm, reflecting her face, no longer weary, but peaceful. Outside, the wind carried the faintest echo of laughter, the sound of distant fiddles, and the rhythm of old harvest dances. She stepped onto the porch and watched the valley awaken. The fog was gone now, replaced by gentle sunlight and the murmur of life. A flock of crows lifted into the sky, their wings catching the light like shards of obsidian. The river sparkled, winding through the fields like liquid glass. Clara breathed in deeply, the scent of earth and morning filling her chest. Somewhere beyond the hills, a church bell rang slow and hollow, the same tone she had heard in her vision. But now it sounded softer, forgiving. The promise had been renewed. Salem Hollow would remember. Clara sat on the porch steps, the warmth of the sun soaking into her skin. She closed her eyes, listening to the gentle hum of the land, and whispered a final thank you to the unseen ones who had watched through the night. Her lantern dimmed at last, its job done for now. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The day slipped softly into dusk, painting the horizon in shades of amber and rose. Salem Hollow seemed to breathe again. Every window glowed with golden candlelight. Every rooftop shimmered as though dusted in quiet magic. Clara spent the afternoon tending to the soil. Her hands blackened, but her heart calm. The tiny golden sprout had already grown to her knees, its leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Birds returned to the trees that had been silent for years, and even the old scarecrow now seemed less lonely, its shadow stretching peacefully over the fields. Yet as the sun sank lower, a familiar unyase stirred that subtle hum beneath the calm, like a pulse too deep to name. When twilight finally bled across the valley, Clara lit the lantern again. The light within burned steady, golden but touched with a faint crimson now, as if remembering the old blood of the harvest. She carried it through the fields, watching fireflies blink in gentle constellations around her. The corn rustled softly. Then, somewhere near the river bank, she heard it again, a voice, faint and melodic, singing an old tune she didn't know but somehow recognized. She followed the sound to the edge of the water. There, reflected in the rippling surface, stood a woman who looked almost like her. The same dark hair, the same gray eyes, though older, wiser, wrapped in a cloak woven with silver threads. Clara's breath caught. "Grandmother," she whispered. Dot. The reflection smiled, though the lips never moved. "You have done well, child," the voice said, echoing through the reeds. "The covenant breathes again, but the veil never closes easily. For every light kept, a shadow lingers." Clara's lantern flickered. "What shadow?" she asked softly. Her grandmother's reflection darkened. The river shimmered, and for an instant Clara saw something beneath its surface. Faces, countless faces, pale and silent, gazing upward from the deep. "The forgotten," her grandmother's voice said. "Those who took without giving, who silenced the land. They linger in the hollow places. When the harvest moon wanes, they stir again, searching for warmth they can no longer feel." The water stilled. The reflection was gone. Only Clara remained, the lantern's glow trembling against the current. The air grew cooler. From the far side of the bank came a rustle, faint at first, then growing. She turned and saw shapes moving between the cornstalks. They weren't solid, but not entirely mist, either outlines of men and women with hollow eyes, drifting as though caught between remembering and forgetting. The same lost souls she had glimpsed in the village. One stepped forward, his face young but lined with centuries of hunger. "Keeper of the lantern," he rasped, voice like wind through reeds. "Do you remember us?" Clara swallowed hard. "I do," she whispered. "Then let us rest." His form flickered, the outline trembling. The others behind him murmured the same plea. "Let us rest." Clara raised the lantern, the flame within responding with sudden warmth. The light spread outward in gentle waves, touching each ghostly figure. As it did, their outlines softened, dissolving into silver motes that rose into the sky. The man's voice softer now, spoke one last time. The land remembers kindness. Do not forget. Again, and then they were gone. The wind shifted, carrying only the scent of damp earth and river water. Clara stood there for a long time, the lantern cooling in her hand, its flame smaller now, but still alive. When she finally turned back toward the farmhouse, the moon was rising, pale and perfect, its reflection gleaming across the water, a sea wall. She thought of her grandmother, of the villagers in the mist, of the forgotten souls freed by light. She understood then that the harvest was more than crops or soil. It was the rhythm of memory and forgiveness, the pulse of gratitude that kept the world awake. When she reached the porch, she placed the lantern on the railing and looked out at the valley. Fireflies danced in lazy circles above the corn, and the new sprout gleamed gold in the moonlight. She whispered softly, "Thank you, not to anyone, but to everything." Inside, the house was quiet. The air was warm. On the table beside the recipe book, a single feather lay black at its tip, white at its base. She smiled faintly and left it where it was, a small reminder that light and shadow always shared the same root. The clock struck midnight. The lantern's glow dimmed to a steady pulse, like a heartbeat in sleep. Clara cuddled beneath her grandmother's quilt, listening to the wind hum through the eaves. Not haunting now, but content. And as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The harvest moon hung lower now, swollen and pale, its edge brushing the horizon like an eyelid growing heavy with sleep. The valley was quieter than ever. Even the crickets had gone still, and the river's murmur had softened to a hush. Clara felt it in her bones, the turning of something ancient, the breath before the end of a cycle. The seed she had planted now stood taller than the scarecrow, its golden leaves whispering softly in the night breeze. But beneath that gentle sound, she could hear another rhythm, a deep, low thrum, like the slow heartbeat of the earth itself. She sat on the porch, the lantern beside her casting a circle of amber light. Its flame was smaller tonight, flickering faintly, as if tired. The warmth that had filled the valley was fading, replaced by a thin chill that slid beneath her skin. She knew the harvest moon's magic was waning, and with it, the fragile bridge between the living and the remembered. Then, from across the field, a shadow moved. Slow, deliberate. It wasn't fog, nor was it one of the gentle spirits she'd met before. This presence was heavier, darker, as though made of everything that had been forgotten and left to rot beneath the soil. The lantern trembled, its glass rattling softly. Clara rose, wrapping her shawl tight around her shoulders. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The scarecrow shifted, its head turned toward her, straw rustling like dry paper. For a moment she thought she saw eyes behind the burlap, not glowing, but reflecting her lantern's faint light. Then the voice came, rough and hollow, like the scrape of wind through an empty barn. "Keeper of the lantern," it said, "you have stirred the old soil, but not all that sleeps beneath it longs for light." Clara took a step forward, the lantern lifted before her. "I came to restore the harvest," she said softly, "to honor what was lost." The scarecrow's grin widened, a stitch pulling free. Honor, it, iset. It, they, ituk, te, ifieste. They left the earth hollow, and now you would feed it again. You would wake what should stir. She felt the chill deepen, creeping into the marrow of her bones. The fields began to move, as though something vast stirred beneath them, a slow rolling like a buried tide. The golden stalks bent, not from wind, but from unseen hands, pressing upward. Clara steadied her breath. The land doesn't want vengeance, she whispered. It wants remembrance. The scarecrow laughed a dry, splintering sound. Then remember me. Its form erupted, straw and shadow rising together into a whirl of dust and smoke. Faces flickered within it. Farmers, children, the forgotten dead, all twisted by hunger and loss. The air reeked of soil and decay. Clara's lantern flared wildly, as if trying to fight back the darkness. She fell to her knees, clutching it tight, whispering the words her grandmother once told her light to soil. Preto win heart to harvest, never to win. The flame steadied. It grew, small at first, then brighter, stronger, a sun trapped in glass. The shadows recoiled, shrieking, dissolving into wisps that fled into the fields. When the last of them faded, the scarecrow stood silent once more, its head bowed. A single tear of wax rolled down its burlap cheek and vanished. Clara rose slowly, trembling but unbroken. The lantern still glowed, but its flame was now pure white, gentle, endless. She felt warmth return to the ground beneath her feet, the hum of the earth smoothing into calm. The seed's great stalk bowed toward her, heavy with glowing ears of grain. She touched one gently, and it burst into a shower of golden light that drifted upward, spreading across the valley like a dawn that came from within. The moon seemed to sigh. Its pale glow dimmed, softening into silver mist. The long night of the harvest was ending. Clara turned toward the farmhouse, exhaustion heavy in her limbs, but peace blooming in her chest. The valley had quieted again, not empty now, but full of presence, of memory, of gratitude. She set the lantern by the window, its steady white flame bathing the room in warmth. As she looked out over the fields, she could see faint shapes, the villagers, the old woman, her grandmother, standing among the corn, smiling before fading back into the wind. Clara whispered, "Sleep well." Then she lay beneath the quilt, her eyes closing as the lantern's light dimmed to a soft pulse, matching the rhythm of her breath. And, as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Years passed in Salem Hollow like a slow exhale, each season folding gently into the next. The land, once weary and thin, bloomed again with quiet abundance. Wheat bowed golden beneath the sun, apples ripened heavy on their branches, and every October, when the harvest moon began to rise, the valley filled with a soft, familiar hum. People said it was the wind moving through the corn. The old ones whispered otherwise, that it was the earth itself singing in thanks. Clara lived quietly in the farmhouse on the hill, tending her garden, keeping the lantern on the windowsill where it burned every night. The light never dimmed, though years slipped by and her hair turned silver as moonlight. Children from the village came to visit her, bringing her loaves of bread and stories. She would smile, offer them warm cider, and tell them tales of the old harvests, of how the fields once slept beneath a curse of silence, and how one autumn night a lantern's light brought memory back to the land. The villagers called her the keeper, though she never claimed the name. She said the real keeper was the earth, patient, forgiving, always listening. Still, every harvest moon they gathered outside her farmhouse with candles and songs, laying ribbons in the fields to honor what had been restored. When the sun went down, they would see it faint but steady, the glow of countless lights moving among the corn, like souls dancing in gratitude. Sometimes, as the moon climbed high, Clara would walk to the edge of the field and listen. Beneath the whisper of leaves, she could still hear the echoes of that night long ago. The old woman's voice, her grandmother's lullaby, the plea of the forgotten, now turned to peace. She would close her eyes and whisper softly, "The light remains." Then, one autumn evening, when the air carried the scent of wood smoke and cider, the villagers noticed that the lantern in Clara's window burned brighter than ever before. It glowed so fiercely that its reflection shimmered across the fields like daylight. By morning, the light had dimmed, and Clara was gone. The farmhouse door stood open, the air inside warm and golden. On the table, beside her grandmother's recipe book, lay a single ear of golden wheat, bound with a black and white feather. The people searched, but found no trace of her, only her footprints leading into the fields, ending where the first rays of dawn touched the soil. The earth was soft there, and from its surface a small green sprout had begun to rise. Since that morning, no one has touched the lantern. It still burns on the windowsill, its light constant through every storm, every winter. Travelers passing through Salem Hollow sometimes claim to see a woman standing in the mist near the bridge, holding a lantern that glows with a heart of gold. Some say she hums an old harvest tune. Others say she walks the edge of the fields, keeping watch so the forgotten never rise again. And every autumn, when the moon ripens full and round, the valley shines with a faint shimmer of promise kept. The people light their candles, place them along the riverbank, and whisper her name to the night breeze. They say if you listen closely, you'll hear her voice whisper back, "Keep the light." The fog drifts low. The crickets return their song. The world breathes, slow and calm, and somewhere, deep beneath the soil, the heartbeat of Salem Hollow continues, steady, peaceful, eternal. As the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. The valley of Salem Hollow lay quiet beneath the gentle sweep of the harvest moon, its pale light bathing the fields in silver and gold. Even in the deepest shadows, there was no fear, only memory, soft as a sigh. The corn whispered secrets to one another, their stalks nodding gently in the night breeze, as if acknowledging that the long cycle of watching and remembering had finally found rest. Clara's lantern still burned in the farmhouse window, steady and unwavering. Its flame held the warmth of countless harvests, the laughter of villagers long past, and the silent gratitude of those who had once wandered lost in the fog. Travelers spoke of glimpsing a figure walking along the edges of the field, a woman with hair like moonlight and a lantern that glowed from within, guiding the valley, as she had been guided long ago. Some claim to hear faint humming, a lullaby carried by the wind, soft and endless, echoing the rhythms of the earth itself. On quiet nights, when the fog curls low and the river murmurs through the valley, the people of Salem Hollow leave candles along the paths, and near the old bridge they light them not for themselves, but for the unseen, for the keepers, for the forgotten, for the harvest that has always been more than crops or soil. And in that moment, when the lanterns flicker in harmony with the moon, one can almost see it. Faint shapes among the cornstalks, dancing, bowing, tending the fields, a symphony of memory and gratitude. The earth hums beneath their feet, steady, timeless. The rhythm of harvest and remembrance flows through the valley, unbroken. Every seed sown, every candle lit, every whisper of thanks adds to it, weaving a tapestry of light and shadow that spans generations. And somewhere in that quiet, Clara's presence lingers, not as a figure of flesh and bone, but as the enduring heartbeat of the valley, a keeper of memory, a guardian of the light. The night deepens. Stars scatter across the sky like silver dust. The fields are calm, the river mirrors the moon, and the lantern glows faintly, a beacon of hope, constancy, and magic. The echoes of the harvest moon ripple softly through the air, a reminder that even in silence, in darkness, the past is never truly gone. It whispers, it watches, and it waits ready to guide the next hand that will honor it. And as the story fades, allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep.